This video contains spoilers for Dark Souls 1 and 3, as well as Bloodborne and Sekiro. Unkindled discretion is advised. In the primitive and archaic religions, the eternal repetition of the divine exploits is justified as an imitatio Dei. The sacred calendar annually repeats the same festivals, that is, the commemoration of the same mythical events, the eternal return of the same primordial situations, and hence a reactualization of the same sacred time. For a religious man, reactualization of the same mythical events constitutes his greatest hope. For with each reactualization, he again has the opportunity to transfigure his existence, to make it like its divine model. The perspective changes completely when the sense of religiousness of the cosmos becomes lost. The periodical sanctification of cosmic time then proves useless and without meaning. The gods are no longer accessible through the cosmic rhythms. The religious meaning of the repetition of paradigmic gestures is forgotten. But repetition empty of its religious content necessarily leads to a pessimistic vision of existence. When it is no longer a vehicle for reintegrating a primordial situation, and hence for recovering the mysterious presence of the gods, that is, when it is desacralized, time becomes terrifying. It is seen as a circle, forever turning on itself, repeating itself to infinity.
Be forewarned, eager Ash. Should this world wither and rot, even then would Ariandel remain our home. Leave us be, Ashen One.
You're sure to be in a fine haze about now, but don't think too hard about all of this. Just go out and kill a few beasts. It's for your own good. You know, it's just what hunters do.
Dark Souls, as we know it, does not make sense. Multiple areas seem entirely vestigial, with no relation to what we typically consider the core storyline. Furthermore, the DLC in these games, while excellent, also often feels like a completely different universe than the one we experienced in the base game. Ultimately, the pieces never fit. We have too many of them. As a result, most of the player-derived lore tends to focus on certain clusters of the experience, ignoring the parts that lack an obvious connection. So if we are willing to accept that Dark Souls doesn't make sense, then either Dark Souls itself is incoherent, or our understanding of Dark Souls is incomplete. And as Miyazaki himself told us, Dark Souls is in some ways an incomplete game, and I'd like to think it has been completed by players, by their discoveries as they moved along. I'd love to say that the nature of this incompleteness was completely deliberate, but it is both deliberate and by accident, in different ways. Well, we're players, so let's delve in and use our discoveries to solve this mystery. It's no secret that Dark Souls 3 is a game that draws heavily from previous titles in the series, to the point that some people criticize it for being derivative. In what might be my favorite video game review ever, William Hughes of the AV Club describes the game's Ring City DLC as an expression of the idea that, here at the end, Dark Souls can no longer remember those things that once made it great. The most perfect thing here is that I don't think he has any idea how deeply accurate that statement is. The Ringed City might be the most beautiful location in all of video game history. The cathartic conclusion to the most exquisite suffering we'll ever experience in the medium. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's no secret that video games tend to be incomplete. Release schedules are difficult to hit, and the nature of the medium leads to unexpected bottlenecks. But there's plenty of tricks to extending the life of content you already have. From the myriad of palette swaps we saw back in the 16-bit era and earlier, to simply inverting your current world to create an entire second act. So looking at a fight like Sister Friede, it's perfectly understandable that she's a convergence of the souls that came before her. For her Dark Flame, Manus, Father of the Abyss. Her Scythe Grind, Father Gascoigne. her flying smash, Martyr Logarius, her mini scythe grab, Gehrman the First Hunter, to even just her big flaming swipes, Abyss Watchers via Mircea, via Fume Knight, via Gwyn. After all, designing all the components of an attack takes time, and if you have perfectly usable ones sitting around, why bother reinventing the wheel? But Friede has one reused attack in particular that stands out, her invisibility, because it recalls another boss hidden away in the cold recesses of a painted world, crossbreed Priscilla. There's a lot of imagery tying the two characters together. Their scythes, the frigid spaces they inhabit, and the bridge you use to enter their home. But the thing that stands out most is the echo within their words, their desire to simply be left alone.
Who art thou? One of us thou art not. If thou hast misstepped into this world, plunge down from the plank and hurry home. If thou seekest aye, thine desires shall be requited not. Thou must returneth whence thou came.
But forlorn thou seemeth not, Ashen One. I know not the missteps which led thee to this painted world, but thy duty is all, and thy duty lieth elsewhere. Return from whence thou camest.
The parallels here are stark and most certainly deliberate. When you repeat an animation, that can merely be a cost-saving decision, but word choice like this is for its own sake. Because unlike lines of code, words are cheap in the profane world of business, but priceless in the sacred space of the writer's head. This repetition means something to someone, and isn't it a fun mystery to decipher what that meaning is? The Souls games, as well as their spiritual siblings Bloodborne and Sekiro, have countless moments where they echo one another. This can be through dialogue, or through symbolic imagery, or even through level design. These echoes create resonance points that we can use to transpose our understanding of themes surrounding one of the points into the other, and just see what happens. Take Friede's room. It is one of the most intricately decorated locations in the entire series. The room is lined with a plethora of portraits featuring a serene nun, and most of the portraits are unique. But the game itself never acknowledges any of this. So how could we ever have a clue as to why any of this is even here? In Sekiro, we have a character known as the Sculptor. In a similar motif, his temple contains piles of his carvings, his creations. But unlike the painted world, here we have an explanation for the compulsive repetition.
No matter what I do, any Buddha I carve is an incarnation of wrath. Thus is the fate of those who owe a deep karmic debt. You will understand when you try carving one for yourself one day.
Transposing this theme back to the Chapel of Ariandel, it stands out how violent the portraits are, with most of them ending in immolation. We have another artist stuck in a never-ending cycle of creation, with each iteration of the cycle ending in violence and tragedy. These resonance points extend even beyond the games themselves. In order to gain access to the painted world, the player must speak with Slave Knight Gale. Prior to this encounter, Gale can be overheard chanting a prayer.
Ah, merciful goddess, mother of the forlorn, who have no place to call their own.
This wording is fascinating because, going back to the DesignWorks interview for Dark Souls 1, Priscilla is described as someone who's being chased from her natural place, which would certainly qualify as an individual with no place to call their own. But it doesn't end there. Jumping now far forward in time, we have FromSoft's 2018 title, Deracine. Compared to the rest of their recent catalog, it's a rather peaceful title. As Miyazaki puts it, it's creatively fresh for me personally. I am drawing from different sources of energy, but it's not just me, it's the staff too. People working on our other games find it a nice change of pace. Internally, it's been perceived as a breath of fresh air. As you can imagine, our other title, Sekiro, has a completely opposite mood and direction. The more time I spend working on Sekiro, the deeper I sink into this zone of blood and gore and conflict. But if I want to get out of it, I can walk over to the other side of the studio and ease myself into a completely different feeling when I work on Deracine. All that has resonance, of course, but for me the biggest point of intrigue is the name of the game itself. When asked about its meaning, Miyazaki responds, Deracine is French for uprooting, or someone who has been displaced from their natural environment. This is a degree of thematic repetition bordering the obsessive. FromSoft's games have spent over a decade playing around with this single idea. Doesn't it make you wonder why? The world of Dark Souls is trapped in a cycle, a violent one. And in this case, repetition delegitimizes. Like a JPEG that's been compressed too many times, the world is degrading, withering, rotting. And if we're looking for the source of that rot, what better place to look than the home of the forlorn, the painted world?
Surely you've seen the rot that afflicts our world, but that which fooled the good father and buried the flame, after we had all made up our minds too. So, please, grant us one wish. Make the tales true, and burn this world away.
It's an area full of mysteries. Why has its bell been destroyed? And why is that destroyed bell nowhere near a bell tower? Why is Father Ariandel a prisoner, not one, but 2 times over? First bewitched by Friede into burying the flame and allowing the rot to spread, but then also restrained from helping her until he is empowered by the grief and horror of her murder. At your hands. And why is all the water missing? Not merely here in the Corvine settlement, where the river has been replaced by a trickle of blood, but all over the place, even going all the way back to Dark Souls 1. And of course there's Bloodborne, where missing rivers can be found absolutely everywhere. At this point, maybe you think I'm reading too much into negative space, spending too much time staring into the abyss. But consider that Dark Souls was originally going to be about water. From what I remember, Firelink's Shrine was originally designed as a water temple. But as work on the game progressed, and the image of kindling and fire became more prominent, the water gradually dried up. Haha. And that ties everything together quite nicely, because the original inhabitant of what became Firelink's Shrine was Priscilla. Initially, Priscilla was the heroine of the story, and she was going to be there, for example. That's not really something I want to talk about just yet. Priscilla is certainly the most beautiful character in the game. Thank you. She was the heroine of the story at one point, so I'm glad you think so. Moving on to the Undead Burg. Why is Miyazaki so eager to change the topic here? Why is discussion of Priscilla verboten? This is the mystery that lies before us. Because I sense a secret in the nightmare and cannot bear to leave it be. My apologies for leaving you with more questions than answers today. But if the spirit of Bergenworth stirs within you, then join me next time as we continue to unravel the mystery of the painted world. Until then, so long, good hunters, and may you find your worth in the waking world.